Good morning. I'd like to call the regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. It is Tuesday, September 8th, 2015. It is now 8:31. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Selectman Harvard to lead us, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Charles. Item 2 is a public hearing to obtain comment on an ordinance to amend the code of the town of Guilford, Chapter 214, Parks and Public Places. Chapter 214 is being amended to permit U.S. Coast Guard approved personal flotation devices at public swimming areas and to update certain provisions related to the use of beaches. Okay, I'll ask Rick Maynard to give us a slight summary on the changes in the ordinance. Rick, good morning.
Good morning.
Rick is our Director of Parks and Recreation.
So the current ordinance was written in 1994, and that prohibited any kind of flotation devices at all. And that was based on national thinking at that time for safety, that it gave both the parents and the child a false sense of security. It also lengthened the time the child could actually learn how to swim, because they don't have to swim, they can just kind of float around. But the thinking has changed over the years, and that was brought to our attention by an individual at one of our beaches this summer who had some concerns about not allowing flotation devices. So we researched it. We found the Red Cross does recommend it now. Kerma, our insurance company, recommended it. And most towns in the state do allow flotation devices now. But specifically, they're Coast Guard approved personal flotation devices, not those little floaty, swimmy things that sometimes kids blow up and wear on their arms. They're Coast Guard approved. So we had a lot of conversation back and forth with the Parks and Rec Commission, and Pam Millman wrote the revised ordinance based on what the Commission's desire was. One thing we wanted to emphasize is that we didn't want to create a greater layer of burden on our lifeguards to now certify that they had the right flotation devices. So the way that Pam wrote it into the ordinance is that it's 100% the parent's responsibility. We also want to make it clear that the parent must be in the water with the child. They can't just let the kid go off floating around while they go read a book or sun themselves. They have to be there. It's their responsibility. So that's written right into the ordinance. We're comfortable that I think it will provide safety for the kids, and it maintains responsibility on the parent's shoulders to make sure it's the right kind of flotation device, and they have to be there with their child. That's pretty much a summary of where it is.
Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in favor of the change? Okay. Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition of the change? Seeing none? Okay. Any comments from the board?
I would just say on behalf of my wife and my daughter-in-law, they approve.
Okay.
They were down at Jacobs and both were said, why couldn't my youngest grandson wear his flotation device?
Any other further comments on this issue?
Sounds like a logical update.
Okay.
Do it.
Okay, seeing that, I'm going to ask for a motion to close the public hearing then.
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
Okay, all's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. The selectmen will take this issue up further down on the agenda. Okay.
I don't know about number 9, though. All swimmers must wear swimsuits?
We'll take that up.
Yeah.
All right. Item 3, approval of minutes, 3.1. Approval of the minutes of the August 17th, 2015 regular meeting. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any addition or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. 3.2, approval of the August 24th special meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved. 3.3, approval of the minutes of August 31st, 2015, which was a special meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Item 4, Fire Chief Charles Hirschshaft. 4.1, consider and take possible action to contract with Shipman's Fire Equipment for the purchase of fire equipment off the state contract on the assistance of the firefighters grant program. Morning, Chief.
Good morning.
How you doing?
So when you accepted the grant, I'll be back for you to waive the requirement because it is on a state contract and they are also the sole source vendor. So the amount of the purchase order is $239,437. Any questions?
Okay. And we have a copy of the requisition detailing all the equipment under the grant. And this is a state, off the state contract.
And so you need a motion to recommend that we award it to Shipman's Fire Equipment
That's correct.
for the total of $239,437. I'll move that.
Second.
Motion's been made, second. Any discussion on the motion?
Just one quick question, Charlie. Why did the second bidder bother to show up knowing that they couldn't?
That's not the same,
Oh, okay,
No,
that's not the same.
That's
All
not the
right.
same one, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. Item 4.2, discuss and take possible action on award of bid 9-1516, oxygen generator for the Guilford Fire Department. Chief?
We received 2 bids. Only one bidder bid on the oxygen generator itself in the amount of $42,250, which is for Shipman's Fire Equipment. And Common Sense only bid on the oxygen bottles for the amount of $1,135. Shipman's bid on it for $1,325. So I recommend that we award the oxygen generator to Shipman's and the oxygen bottles to Common Sense EMS Supplies.
Okay.
So we need a motion.
We need, yeah, we need a motion to, first of all, award the generator to Shipments,
Right.
and then a second motion to award the bottles to Common Sense.
You want separate?
Yeah, I think we should do it
Oh,
separate,
okay.
okay?
I'll move that we award the generator bid to Shipman's Fire Equipment Company for the amount of $42,250.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? See none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
And then you need another motion to award to Common Sense EMS Supply for the oxygen bottles. Now, is that a total of $1,135?
Yes, it is, total.
The reality is for this amount, we actually don't have to approve it.
Well,
Yeah, we
Or
should.
because it went out to bid.
Yeah.
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 So I'll move that.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes. Thank you, Chief.
Obviously, $1,300, you didn't need it because it went out to bid.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, item 5, Town Planner George Kroll, receive and discuss preliminary report from the Housing for Economic Development.
Good morning, George.
Morning, George.
Sandy's gonna join me.
Okay, and,
Ron Sonicson, our consultant, is also here.
okay, come to the table,
Sandy,
please.
as you noted, if you read the September 8th memo, is the chair of the committee. The committee studying this issue. We also have our consultant, Rob Sonicson, is here with us. And a number of our committee members are here as well. Mr. Palumbo, Mr. Siebert,
Mr. Curry.
Mr. Curry, and Ms. Ruben Dunst. They're all here to provide moral support for us.
Great, welcome.
We're expecting MJ any minute, but as we all know, it's the first day of school and she isn't here yet. But she will be.
School bus is late.
Who knows?
I believe you all received the full report, an electronic version,
And your memo.
and the cover memo dated September 8th. I'd like to go over the cover memo briefly and then entertain any questions that you might have. As you know, if you read this report, we've received the preliminary draft from our consultant of the plan, which is called the Guilford Housing for Economic Development Plan, HEDP for short. Somewhat awkward terminology. The report was prepared by Waldo Associates under the direction of Rob Sonicson and several of his colleagues at Waldo, as well as assistance from the architecture firm East Wharf Architects, which you see identified on the second page, Tom McDonald, and also Stanley Nastowski, who's a real estate professional. All of them worked on the report. The report was prepared under a grant awarded by Department of Housing, State of Connecticut. The scope of work was to review property that has access to public transit in Guilford, to assess the potential for sites, to identify sites that might be suitable for what the state has called housing for economic development, sometimes also known as affordable housing. No specific program or definition of affordable housing is keyed to this work necessarily. What we're essentially looking for is opportunities for higher density housing in the transit corridor that might be potentially suitable for affordable housing development. The project, as I mentioned, was funded by the Department of Housing. The areas that we looked were basically along Route 1 and then also properties in the vicinity of the train station. These are sites that, of course, have access to public transit. The results of the work can be identified fairly simply. 7 sites were identified for possible further consideration in the study area. They're located in all parts of the study area, including what we sometimes refer to as the Route 1 West area, also the town center south, around the train station, and on the east side of Route 1. Something that we all knew going into the study, but was certainly further reinforced by the results of the study: development of affordably priced housing in Guilford is extremely difficult, given high land costs and also significant development costs, especially infrastructure, especially sewage disposal. The implication of that is clearly that to produce affordable housing requires subsidies. Subsidies by the town, perhaps, subsidies by the state, subsidies by the federal government, private sector subsidies. Market rate development probably doesn't produce affordable housing. All the sites that we looked at were compatible with their surroundings, the development of which would be compatible with their surroundings, and in conformance with neighborhood character and values, at least as we determined it. None of the property owners who were identified were specifically contacted by us. Some of them are familiar with the study, and those property owners who perhaps followed some of the public discussion about the study are aware that their sites are part of our inventory, if you will, but we have not made any formal contact with any of them. Sandy and I have met with several developers with a potential interest in this type of work. These are in both cases affordable housing developers, nonprofits, and they have shown interest. Both of the folks who contacted showed interest in our properties or in our project. The next steps for this work, we're in the process of developing a presentation which we would make to a public meeting, which we would expect to organize and conduct sometime in the near future, in the next month or so. We want to confirm public support for this effort. We believe that there is significant public support for affordable housing development in Guilford. We want to pursue additional funding for further study. We are aware of one grant program that's actually a part 2 of the grant that we received to do the overall study, and this funding focuses on more detailed preliminary design and feasibility studies associated with a specific property. So once we've identified a specific property or properties that we think might be of further interest, we would be able to hopefully secure funding to do that type of work. That would be the town making an application for funding to do preliminary design and further infrastructure, sewage disposal design, cost estimating, and so forth. We'd like to continue to meet with developers that express interest in our projects. We would like to try to establish the availability of the town property that's identified in the study, which I'm sure you noted, what we sometimes refer to as the Woodruff property. Our study actually called it the Stonehouse Lane property. We prefer to call it the driveway property because the access to the developable portion of the property is from the driveway, we believe. We'd like to ascertain whether the town is interested in looking at that further for potential development. We probably need to do some more work related to zoning and establishing design criteria for whatever type of project we identify, and that's probably going to be key to the specific site that we identified. Some of the sites are already appropriately zoned, some of them are not, and we'd like to work on design guidelines to guide potential developers. Finally, we'd like to secure some type of institutional approval of the project by the Board of Selectmen and/or the Planning and Zoning Commission to establish that the recommendations of the plan are in fact the official policy of the town. That's what I had to, that's what Sandy and I have to say on behalf of the committee. We have identified the committee members for your reference, and also the staff people who've worked on this project, myself and Dennis Johnson. Pat Donique is our clerk. If you have any questions, Sandy's here. She may want to add to what I've said. Rob's also here to help us answer any questions you might have.
It seems that through the borders on this map, that there is a concentration being around transportation, bus routes, train, or whatever.
Yes.
But yet I think of, the existing affordable housing in town now, that, are not all within that confined,
Correct.
I'm wondering if that was too confining for affordable. It's gonna confuse the terms, but I mean, there
Right.
might be more economical pieces of property or parcels to purchase
Right.
that are not within walking distance to bus routes or trains or
We
something like
noted-
that.
Yeah, we noted that. That's a very good point. And we also noted that affordable in the sense of Guilford, if the median income in Guilford is $90,000 for a family, people that could qualify for affordable could be earning a combined income of $60,000 to $70,000, and it is not odd to think that they would have access to at least one vehicle. So this study did kind of only focus on theoretically distances of a mile from, I think, up to a mile from a bus stop or a train location. So you're absolutely
Oh, it did,
right.
because these boundaries are certainly not a mile.
Right, but
I mean, I'm
I think we
assuming the
had,
blue is boundaries
Yeah.
that you
I
studied.
think we were allowed to go a mile out. Is that
I
right?
don't recall.
These aren't a mile.
Anyway, but
Not necessarily.
yeah, well, these are closer, but
These-
because they were on Route 1.
The
But-
funding
but-
of the study
yeah.
limited us
Limited,
to public
yeah.
transit availability.
Yeah.
That was the criteria of the Department of Housing grant.
So maybe we thought a mile was as far as
That's what I
somebody would
understood,
go.
is that you had
Right.
that criteria,
Right.
but
Yes.
in a community like Guilford.
No question.
It isn't necessarily logical, and I wonder if it's a possibility to really examine properties in town and ask for an exception in this grant process, because, grants aren't,
It also made the study a lot, I mean, if we were to look at the entire 50 square miles of Guilford and look for sites that might be suitable, the scope of work would be much greater than what we
Of
had.
course.
So
I'm just
this
thinking-
it does seem like a logical place to start, at least. Clearly,
Concern, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No.
I do want to, because from my experience on planning and zoning, it's always, and no matter what came before Unless at that point in time, traffic was always an issue. And here we are jamming perhaps potentially 80 more bedrooms into the one area that we already have issues with. And you know, there's a certain counter logic to it from a zoning perspective. I mean, you're talking about substantial numbers of bedrooms, which means people, which potentially might mean traffic, and we're jamming it into something that constantly is criticized about traffic.
I'm not sure I would agree with the terminology jamming it into. I think Route 1 clearly
not
is
jamming
a
it
place
to,
that is
study.
capable of
Yeah,
handling a lot of traffic.
okay, yeah.
So I don't think any of the developments that we have actually contemplating would be significant traffic generators. I think the other logic of the transit-oriented sites is that these are areas where multifamily housing development's kind of already occurring. It's where the higher density zoning already is. So it's a lot easier to think of higher density housing along Route 1 in terms of neighborhood and community acceptance than it is to talk about it on Long Hill Road or Little Meadow Road or Great Hill Road or wherever you might be. So there's a certain logic to that as well. Clearly, no matter, unless the only people in Guilford who are really transit dependent are people who physically or mentally can't drive. I mean, the poorest people in Guilford, or in probably basically anywhere, have a car. Cars are pretty much a necessity, no matter how poor you are.
Or transportation services are available, so either way
people-
you have a set of wheels
Correct.
going to a
Right.
minimum of these 10 bedrooms twice a day.
All of the affordable housing sites that we have, of course, are located in what I would call the center, you know, in the not center of town, the publicly assisted ones at least. But you're right.
77, I mean, that's a substantial,
Which is what?
the one, not at 77, the one up Long Hill Road, that's a
Sage and Hollow.
Or Apple Tree.
Apple
right?
Tree.
Apple Tree.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's the one that jumped to my mind, plus the
Right.
ones on my street, and, you know,
Mhm. Clearly.
I can
And maybe
appreciate the confines of grants, and they have to write it in some way.
Right.
It's just
It's
that,
possible
from
that-
my P and Z experience, you know, it was always, you know, like you said, concentration, and here we're
Absolutely, you're correct. One of the things we're actually hoping that this study will do once it becomes public is that if property owners or others have properties that they know of that might be of interest, and we're especially thinking of larger sites where maybe the owner wants to contribute in some way to the feasibility of affordable housing site. If they're not one of the sites we've identified, they're off the transit grid, so to speak, then we could certainly take a look at it.
This grant is for the study, not for actually any development or development rights.
No.
Right.
Right. The second phase of the study of the same grant process is the one I just mentioned that will enable us to look at in more detail at the feasibility of a specific site once we've identified a specific site. I assume that it would have to be within the transit corridor, but maybe as you suggest, we could look at some other options.
George gave you a very clear picture of the background of this, but there's also the background of the background, and that's kind of towns in Connecticut like Guilford, Brookfield, Simsbury, and Stonington, not ring towns around cities, but the next suburban level, are all looking at this, partly because of a Connecticut law that 10% of your housing is supposed to be affordable, and very few towns beyond the cities or the ring towns that meet that criteria. And secondly, because the populations of these towns are getting older, the demographics are getting older, and one aspect of affordable housing could help with bringing in a more variety of ages and keeping people who have lived in Guilford or would like to live in Guilford, who meet the qualifications of the $60,000 to $70,000, allowing them an affordable rent or an affordable house. So that's kind of what drives this.
There's even another reason which, you know, frankly, again, I experienced back then, is with affordable housing, I think it's much better for us to do these studies and be ahead of the discussion, because if a developer gets in a situation where he or she has a piece of property and wants to develop it, if we don't have something on the books or a plan in place they can utilize some of the affordable housing regulations to manipulate his own property. And that becomes very real. I mean, so if we're ahead of it and we have identified locations and that type of, and get closer to, is it 10% that we're supposed to have?
I thought it was 10%.
It's some number that we've never
Yeah,
come
I-
close
Yeah.
to.
10%
very few
stays in
towns that-
my
yeah.
mind.
Yeah, we've never come even close.
No.
That would be about
And-
1,000
and,
units in our
um,
case.
Does
I'll be-
55 and older qualify for affordable though? That's not.
Well, if the, like Guilford
Depending the price.
Housing Authority, I mean, those are mostly senior. I don't know if 55 is their criteria or not.
Oh, it's senior housing
Senior
does
housing. Oh,
qualify
yeah,
as
sure.
affordable housing,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
but not necessarily automatically. I mean,
No,
somebody.
no, it has to be subsidized.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what do we need at this point in time?
Nothing? No.
We
it's
need
just-
your, we need your,
Just was.
I agree with it. I
Okay.
think we gotta get ahead of it. It's like
Yeah.
everything else. If you're not ahead of it, you're gonna be
Have you
behind.
prioritized any of these sites yet?
Well, we identified 7.
Yeah, but have you
I know that-
prioritized them?
Well, one of the things we thought, if the driveway slash stone house lane slash partial Woodruff property were to be considered, it would be the town taking the initiative with a town-owned piece of property, as the town did 20 or 30 years ago with the Apple Tree Lane property, which the town gave to the developer for leased to the developer for $1, thus reducing the development cost significantly. And it also addresses some of the plans of Town Hall South. We were talking, not Town Hall South, excuse me, Town Center South.
it's a conspiracy coming out of town.
Spread the blame.
I know, everybody works in Town Hall South will be after me.
You want to close that?
I know,
No, she wants to build a 6-story,
right.
George wants a 6-story office tower.
Yeah.
Of developing parking on the north side of the railroad tracks, which I know you're working on with the state or have talked about, and,
Well, that's a DOT almost a
Right.
requirement, right?
Yes.
right.
Carl,
Yeah.
so we have to be a little careful about
Right.
that, yeah.
But this could actually be very complementary to that with the plan that we talked about with the developer who's interested. And also there could potentially be some commercial piece to this property if they thought there'd be enough traffic on driveway to go to an office or a commercial piece, and also provide, I believe we thought it would be a mixture of affordable and market value housing.
I'm
The
going to
committee-
express an ongoing concern, and I can appreciate the plan, but building housing south of the railroad tracks with one entrance and exit, I really think we gotta think through when we're talking about, sea level and all of those other things. I understand that housing is something that was thought of and planned, but I have strong concerns about the single entrance and exit there.
The
And,
committee itself has not created any kind of priority. We have obviously talked about Woodruff, driveway, as Sandy said, because it's it's obvious, and it follows the model that we followed before. The study, the preliminary review of it was quite favorable. Obviously, there's a lot more investigation needs to be done to confirm all that, but it jumps out at you for those reasons. But the committee has not reached any kind of formal prioritization of the sites. I think some of us were hoping that once we made some of the private property available to the information about them available to some of the developers, maybe they would create their own relationships with the property owner, and maybe they would pick up on it and reach out to one of the property owners. All of these sites have been for sale at one time or another. I think every one of them, sometime over the last several years. Some of them are actively for sale right now. So that, if there's a developer out there who's interested in working with us, and we've talked to several, as we mentioned, they can jump into it right now, and they could run with the ball right, without any further need for public endorsement, so to speak, if they wanted to.
That speaks to my concern earlier in this meeting that, I would just like to see planning ahead of it before we
Exactly.
have to react to something
Sure,
that
no
we may or
question.
may not.
That's what we're trying to do.
Charles, I would make one correction. The driveway site is north of the tracks, but your concerns are still justified.
No, it's not, it's south of the railroad track.
No, it's not.
No,
It's
no,
north.
it's not.
It's north.
Oh, driveway, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
was thinking of, okay.
But that doesn't diminish,
Gather
that doesn't diminish the issues you were worried about. I think there's still an issue in that area north of the, anything that's that close to the tracks and the single access and all that sort of stuff.
Maybe if we let DOT and Amtrak know that we're considering something with that project, might get them off their duff.
Well, the thing that occurred to us as being potentially viable, which Sandy just alluded to, is a so-called joint development between DOT and the housing developer, where parking and the housing could be accommodated together in the same building, parking underneath, residential up above. One of the developers we talked to has done a project exactly like that in, I think it's Bridgeport, where in the vicinity of their train station, they built parking, structured parking with residential development on top. So it's something that could meet a lot of,
At that point or
could
not.
kill a lot of birds with one stone, so to speak. Not that we want to kill birds necessarily, but and DOT, we could ask the state to, they could help pay for this too, because they're interested in joint development, transit-oriented development. This would be a model for a lot of those kinds of things.
Is there regularly funding for affordable housing projects from state and federal sources?
We understand that there is state and federal funding now available for the right projects, yes. The current administration made money available over the last several years, and it's a good time to try to take advantage of that. That wouldn't be funding for the town. That would be funding that would go to a developer, a private developer. We're not, although one of our partners in this project is the Guilford Housing Authority. If they were to become interested in one of these properties, that would be great too. So there's a lot of possibility. Private, for-profit developer, nonprofit, or Guilford Housing Authority would all be potential candidates for some of this.
So your next step would be what, to market this to a developer?
Well, that's sort of an ongoing thing. We also want to do this public, we want to have a public presentation, public meeting where we
Okay.
solicit. And we haven't set a date for that, I don't think yet,
No,
but
we
we've
didn't.
talked about it in the next month or so, doing something.
Because in what I've learned over the last 6 months is that to make a project like this successful, you have to get the support of the public.
Absolutely.
You just can't shove it down the throats of the citizens
no
of
way.
Guilford, because you will not succeed.
The support and education, I mean, all of us on the committee, I couldn't have said anything I said today 6 months ago, so it's a process of learning about it.
Right. And you will get the support, but you gotta
Right.
involve the community on this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the neighbors to any specific project that we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Even more so.
Absolutely.
And at this point in time, Guilford has a good track record, even if it's limited.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I can't think of an unsuccessful affordable housing project.
No, you're right.
And we've got some good examples
We
for
do.
our own community and others.
No question.
I mean, the Guilford Housing Authority, if you use that as one example, has been very successful
Absolutely.
and very widely accepted
Mhm.
by the community.
And a long waiting list for their units.
A very long waiting list, so.
Right,
Good.
and NeighborWorks, which owns the other, the private
Correct.
developments in Guilford, also has a
Correct.
long waiting list for their units, so
So, okay.
Do you have, other than the waiting list, do you have any sense for what the real demand is?
That was
They go
one of-
from 240 down to 20. I mean, what's the demand?
Well, one of our consultants was Stanley Mistowski, who talked a lot about that issue in sort of fairly, I would want to say academic terms. But I think the bottom line is that if the price is right, the demand is unlimited. It's my sense of it, and I think that's what these waiting lists tell us. for apartments that rent for, you know, $600 a month for a one-bedroom, the demand is unlimited. That's my market analysis of all this.
And what's got to be presented is that affordable housing has a connotation that sometimes is not
Right.
accepted
Yes, no question.
with open arms. Okay?
But as Charlie just said,
We have
affordable
attracted,
housing
yeah.
in Guilford does not have that connotation.
That's right.
If you actually look at the
And
units
what
that
I've
we
said
have in Guilford.
time and time
Right.
again is that
Yes.
a lot of our entry-level positions for our own employees would benefit by affordable housing.
No question.
You know, police and fire and public works and whatever.
Clerical.
Some of them can't afford to live in Guilford
Right.
and would benefit by having projects such as this. So it's not to import people into Guilford, it's to provide housing for our own people.
That's right.
And I think that's the message, part of the message that has to get out there.
And Sandy hit a very important part, you know, in all of the comments we've just made. The education and communication, I think, is a valuable part in the very beginning. Because I know in my neighborhood, we have some affordable units, and I remember when they were being built, there was quite a commotion. And, you know, a lot of it was misunderstanding, misinformation, and also there were some concerns of the neighbors that we were able to get the developer to address, and it's been very successful. I mean, and that's my point about, you know, we have many different types of units in this town that have been successful, and we can prove it to people and, you know, address their concerns.
Okay? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Joe, do you want to ask if there's any comments from the other members of the committee, or?
I'd be happy to hear any comments from the committee. Okay, thank you all.
They all showed up if they wanted to say something.
I know two more, Harrison West arrived in MJ Kestner, so the entire back row there is the
Okay.
committee.
A lot of support for this project. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on with our agenda. Item 6, consider and take possible action on an ordinance to amend the code of the town of Guilford, Chapter 214, Parks and Public Places, as a result of the public hearing that we had earlier. Have a copy of the proposed amended ordinance. Do I have a motion?
I would move that we approve the ordinance to amend the code of the town of Guilford, chapter 214, as presented.
Second.
Do we have any discussion on the motion to amend the ordinance? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Now, this, just for information, resides in the clerk's office for 30 days, and then if there is no objection to this, it becomes part of, it becomes the new ordinance, okay? Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Appointments and resignations. All right, 7.1, act on a resignation received from Fred Volker from the Energy Task Force. I'm sorry to see that Fred's resigning. Do I have a motion?
So,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Regrets on that.
Regrets.
7.2, act on a resignation, act received from Harry Brody from the Guilford Lakes Golf Course Commission. Do I have a-
moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Act on a resignation from Richard Wallace from the Public Works Commission. Motion.
So moved.
second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
that's regrets. Act on a resignation from Robert Edmonds from the Harbor Management Commission.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Act on a resignation, a recommendation, excuse me, good, to appoint Eric Hedberg as an alternate to the Golf Course Commission to fill a vacancy for a term to expire September 30th, 2016.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Act on a recommendation to appoint Fran Sweetlick, Sweetlicky, I knew I was gonna screw that one, sorry, to the.
I only know it because I worked with her for years.
Okay. To the Green Committee as the Guilford Keeping Society representatives to fill a vacancy for a term to expire September 30th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Act on a recommendation to reappoint Hank Graver to the Hazard Mitigation Commission for a term to expire September 30th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're up to 2019 already. Act on a recommendation to appoint Fran Paranto as an alternate to the Economic Development Commission to fill a vacancy for a term to expire April 30th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Request for the use of town property. Now, before we go on to 8.1 to 8.6, on 8.4, I did get a email from Kevin McGee over the weekend, and he's absolutely correct. And on the issue of 8.4, which involves the timberlands, the Conservation Commission does have the authority to grant permission. So I would recommend that on 8.4 that we, if we grant permission, it is tentative, subject to, thank you, with the approval of the Conservation Commission, because I don't think they meet until September 23rd. Okay, so is that okay, everybody?
I agree, yeah.
Okay, under the charter, I did check it out over the weekend, he's absolutely correct.
Yeah, he had called me on that.
He did too, okay. Well, you got the same email.
We got the same
Yeah,
email.
okay, so. Want to make the
Okay,
motion?
I would move that, with the exception of 8.4, we approve the recommendations for signs and uses as delineated in the agenda.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then we'll make a separate motion for 8.4.
I would move that we, I guess, approve it subject to the review and approval by the Conservation Commission at their next meeting.
There a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good, thank you. Okay,
Joe, can I?
sure, go ahead.
As a matter of business, I know, and I know over the summer that the Conservation Commission had difficulty meeting because they need a couple of people on the board, so anybody that wants to join, do so, but if they don't have a quorum, what is that gonna do to our process?
Well, they didn't deny it, so I guess
Okay.
by default.
By default,
Okay.
as long as that's clear, I guess,
Right.
yeah. This has happened a number of years, but they've typically used land trust property, and I know that the land trust has reviewed it
Yeah.
and created processes, and I'm not sure why they changed their route or whatever to use the timberlands, but,
Well, our in-house counsel is on vacation, but she would be back by that time
Yeah.
anyway, so we have to defer to her. But I would say that we're okay. Item 9, correspondence. I have nothing to report to the board. Anybody? Okay. 10, I don't think we have any committee reports at the moment. I have no old business. New business, just the Citizens Day Parade is the, I believe it's the 19th, Saturday, 10 o'clock.
Yes.
In, at the corner of Water and Whitfield. We should probably get there a little bit before, like 9:45. Public forum. I see no one wishing to address the board unless our Human Resources Director wants to say something. No? He's shaking his head. If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we're adjourned at 9:15. Thank you, gentlemen.